Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Restless. Hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Today we have a preview of Restless by Restless Designs. Now this is a current GameFound campaign, so you can check out the link down below for everything that they have planned. This is a sponsored preview, and this is also a demo copy in front of me, so all rules, components, and things like that are subject to change. Now Restless is going to be a game for 1 to 4 players where you're playing an adventure mode over the course of 3 different chapters. So it's meant to be a mini campaign where there is a lot in this game to discover. There's a ton of entries where you're going to be reading and going through different decision points and really interacting with the story, but it's also going to be contained within 3 different chapters where you fight a boss at the end of each chapter. So you are going to have a ton of replayability with the characters that you choose, how you choose to upgrade them, the classes that you acquire throughout the game, and everything that you discover. But it's meant to be a campaign where you follow through the 3 different chapters, but it is a bit quick and condensed, so it is very easy to reset, play again, and it's meant to be replayed multiple times. Now, taking a look, the map here is going to be how you navigate the majority of the game. This is what players are going to be moving around and exploring, and it's how you're going to be triggering your different events. Now, I do have it set up for true solo, so there's only 1 character here on the board, but if you were playing with friends, you would have other characters also placed here on the map. Now, whether you're playing true solo or with friends, one player is going to be the Prophet of Doom, and they're going to have this black d20. So this is going to be how your progression goes throughout the game, that you're going to get closer and closer to fighting the end boss each chapter. So there are different symbols on this, and it's rolled at the start of that player's turn, and you're going to move this tracker forward depending on what you rolled. So there's the Doom's side on most of these, and it has either a 1, a 2, or a 3 pip, so depending on what you roll, for example, that's just a 1, this will move forward 1. But each turn, that's going to escalate. For example, now we're going forward 2, and once you enter this threshold here, once you roll the icon that matches in these different brackets, that's when you'll enter the battle with the final boss. So you'll see that this is moving forward, and then finally on this die, there is a nighttime side where this will not have your Doom move forward at all, and players will have a different type of turn that turn where they'll have nighttime events. But just know that this is kind of your time tracker throughout the game. Now, before we talk about the different phases of your turn, I'm going to show you the player board and what that's going to look like. Now, a lot of the stuff that's on my player board, you don't start off with. You start off with your starting class, and that's basically it. So you do have the different classes that you'll choose from, and you can choose a new one every time that you play, but you're going to have to find these different things throughout the game. So there's all different types of cards that you're able to equip onto your player board, but you have to find them to be able to use them. Now you can see that we started off with the Verdant class, and this was up here for us when we had nothing else. But the interesting thing in the game is that when you equip different weapons, that's how you're going to gain different classes, and you are able to swap these out. Now once you're in combat and you've entered combat, you're locked into what you have, but you are able to have a cache of things and swap them out depending on the situation. So here we do have our axe, and this allowed us to become an axe thrower. So these are double-sided, where we could have been a berserker instead, and I'll get into what this means for combat when we get to that part. But now we're able to be an axe thrower as our class, and just depending on what you equip, you're able to be these different things. So for example, over here we have the bow, and you're able to be an archer, but you're also able to be a ranger. So these are double-sided, and you're able to choose. Another example is the dagger, where you're an assassin, or you're able to be a viper. And just to give you another example as well, here's the staff, so you're able to be either a monk or you can be the enchanter. But other things that are interesting is that you're able to also shapeshift. So there are some that are transformations that you're able to become, for example, a vampire or a tiger form or a werewolf, things like that. So these are the different classes that you're going to swap into depending on what you're able to find throughout the game. And it's a very interesting piece that you're able to go between different classes depending on the situation and what you want to have equipped. Now, other things that we have here on our player board, we have a Ring of Strength. As you can see, it's slotted into the piece where it can go. So we have this card here, and that's going to add a strength for us to our strength attribute. And we also have here Fortune Teller, which is a profession. You're able to gain different professions throughout the game. Once between each of your turns, you may predict another player's event number. If you are within range of 10 of the first event they experience, gain 1 resource and 1 experience point. So you'll know exactly what that means in a little bit when I talk about events, but obviously being able to predict something and gain those things is very beneficial. And this is going to be your experience tracker over here, because this not only is going to give you different benefits when you hit certain thresholds, but it also is going to limit you to where you're able to visit on the map. So currently, players are only able to visit the places that have the 1 skull until they unlock certain levels, and then they're able to go to the more dangerous places. So you can see here on the map there are some that are 2 or 3 or 4 skulls, and you have to be at that high enough of a level and have that much experience to be able to explore those areas of the map. Now finally, we have a companion mount over here because you're able to get different companions throughout the game. Not all of them are going to be mounts, but this one is our giant sea turtle. And he says you may be in the Sapphire Bay without renting a boat. You may cross the Emerald Divide anywhere. So the Emerald Divide is this river that's going through the map. And normally you're only able to cross it up here through the Frostbite Peaks, through the Great Crossing, or by going through the Sapphire Bay, which is renting a boat for 1 resource. Now, as you also saw, we don't have to pay that resource and we can ride our turtle through Sapphire Bay, so that's going to be pretty cool for us, and that's going to add more flexibility for moving around the map. So you can see where companions are going to add something beneficial for you, whether it's something a mount is going to do and make moving around the map easier, or perhaps add other things. Now, finally, before we get into the phases of a player's turn, you can see here these are your different attributes where you're going to be able to go up as well as down in these different attributes depending on the things that happen to you. So you have your intellect, strength, agility, and fortune, and you will be testing these different things. So being higher up in these different attributes is definitely going to help you. And one of the things it's going to do is be able to unlock these different abilities for you as well. So you can see that some of them are -2, +2, +1, or -1. And what these are is you're going to be able to unlock these once you're high enough on that level, and then you'll be able to apply these during combat. So you'll be able to refresh them every combat, and once per combat you're able to use them. But this one, for example, is you're able to adjust a die plus or -1. This one is adjusting a die by 2. This one's by -2 instead. So when we get to combat, you'll see why you might want to adjust them either up or down depending on what you're trying to roll. But these are going to be different things that you're able to trigger to make your combat a bit better and reward you for having your stats that high. Finally, you have your resource pouch. So currently we have 2 bones and you have your health, because you are going to be taking a decent amount of damage throughout the game. Yes, from combat, but also just from exploring the board, which I'm going to get to in just a moment with the turn structure. But when you're moving around the board, you're going to be taking a decent amount of damage, either to be able to travel further or for going to new locations as well. So you are going to be tracking your health here, and if you ever reach 0, you're forced to take a hospice turn the next turn at the nearest city. So it is going to take up a turn on you. So you want to be able to watch your health, but it will be pretty normal to be able to lose health. Now, you do have your starting health marker where you aren't able to gain past your starting health unless you gain something that gives you additional health. So for example, if we were to find a ring that would give us +1 health, then we would be able to adjust that higher than our starting health. Now, finally, all players are going to have their own player sheet, and this tracks a lot for you throughout this game and a lot of very important things, so you're going to need to use this. Now, one thing to note, I did use pen on this, and you should definitely use pencil because you will be erasing things. For example, you have your adventures slot and you're only able to have up to 3, so once you complete them, you want to be sure to erase them out of there. And you're also going to have reputations with the different cities. So you want to gain reputation, but if you lose it, you may need to erase it, or if you're in the negative, hopefully you make it a little bit better, and then you'll really erase those negative points as well. So that is one thing to note. But another thing that this is going to track for you is going to be where you explore. So I'm now going to go over what the turn looks like with the different phases, but just know you're going to want to track your exploration on this sheet. So first, if you are the Prophet of Doom, you would roll this die and advance the Doom here. So that is the impending Doom phase if you happen to be the Prophet. If you're playing solo, you will do this every round. But then you'll move on to the travel phase. So during the travel phase, you can move 1, 2, or 3 regions, and When you do so, you'll suffer either 0, 1, or 2 damage respectively. So if you're only moving 1, you won't take any damage at all just from moving, but if you try to move further, you're exerting yourself, so you would take damage from that. Now, this is somewhere that we are able to travel over to. We would take 0 damage from that, but when you're exploring a new area, you will also take damage based on your exploration map. So I did already color it in for us, but we would take 1 damage, and this map shows you how much damage different regions will do. For example, the Ashen Wastes would do 2 damage to you, but when this happens, you gain an experience point. So it isn't great because you are going to be taking damage, but you're going to want to explore as many regions as possible to gain experience points so that you're able to get to the more dangerous places as well. So you'd color in that area, and then now in the future, when traveling here, you won't take any damage for the exploration. So as long as you traveled only 1 to get there, you wouldn't take any damage at all. Or if you traveled a little further, you would take that traveling damage. Now, next is the event phase, and that's when you're going to be rolling these 2 die here. So we're currently in the Echoing Hills, and we will roll these, and we rolled an 84. Now, the higher numbers tend to be better, whereas the lower numbers tend to be a little bit harder, but that's when you're going to go over to your adventure book. So we rolled an 84, and we're going to want to go to the Echoing Hills. So you're going to look here and see the Echoing Hills starts at page 16. So we'll just go over to 16 and then look for 84, which I assume is going to be a little bit more ahead. So this, you can see how the different entries are. This is just going to be a brief flip through while we're looking at these, that you can see some of them are combat encounters where some of them are just going to be stories. So over here we have 84, Forgotten Cache. You notice something buried beneath the foliage. After carefully brushing away the leaves and dirt, you find a worn but sturdy wooden chest. Gain treasure plus 20. So this is actually a great example to show you the other book that comes with the game. So this is going to be your adventure book where your different events are going to be happening, but there's also going to be your traders and treasures book. So now we're going to go to our treasures area and see what treasure that just got for us. And you can see here that it says, when rolling on the treasure table, roll 1d10 plus the event bonus, and for us it was plus 20. If you are lucky, increase the event bonus by plus 2. Unfortunately, we're not. If a card is unavailable, roll again. So here we will roll, and we got a 4, so we rolled a 24. So looking here, a 24 is going to be a random card 50. This again is a great example to be able to show you that there is going to be this card deck here where there are some that are always available. Those are going to be available at the different cities for you to purchase, but there's also going to be all of these other cards that you're not going to know what they do until you're selected to draw them. So with this, we're going to gain a random card 50. So we're going to go to the 50s, and when it says a random card, you can expect that there is more than one. So here we have the 50s, and we're going to shuffle them up, and we're going to gain this one, a magical key. So if an event asks you for a magical key, you may proceed. This is a key that we're now able to hold on to, and honestly, that's pretty cool for us. So that's how you would roll the treasure table. And here you can also see the hospice, which is what you're going to go through when you're trying to heal yourself when you've taken on all of the damage you can take. Now, another thing to look at is, as I said, you have the different cities where you're able to purchase things, and these show you what all of the cities have at all times. So we were currently in the Enclave of the Unbound before we moved out. So if we had stayed there and ended our turn there, after the event phase is the trading phase. So during the trading phase, we would be able to trade with any other players that are either on our spot or adjacent, but we're also able to interact with this. So we would be able to buy any of these cards, except we would have to be either respected on the reputation track for this card or revered for this one. And that means just very ahead on that track. So here you can see the different reputation tracks, the Enclave of the Unbound, and if we were high enough, we would be able to get those different cards. But if we were at least friendly with them, everything is at a -1 resource for us, including these different actions here, such as trading, which you're able to do. Peddler, which is trading in 4 bones for a treasure plus 25, which means, again, 25 plus whatever you roll for the treasure. Or you're also able to upgrade your card, because you are able to upgrade things, and again, you would be able to use that resource discount if you were at least friendly with the Enclave. But here you can see our axe, which is going to cost 6 coins to be able to upgrade, and once you do so, you're able to flip it over to have it be a bit stronger. So I am going to get into combat, but you can see this would be rolling a 3 red die and a green die, whereas this one is only 2 red die and a green die. Now, because it might feel like we went through that pretty quickly, the different phases that you're going to go through on your turn is the impending doom if you happen to be the prophet of doom, and then you're going to travel, so you'll move to different areas, take damage if you need to. Then you have your event phase where you roll the die to interact with the adventure book, and then there's the trading phase where you're able to trade and have these different interactions. Then finally, there's going to be the resting phase, and that's when you're going to be able to heal. So in between turns, you're able to heal 1 at the end of your resting phase, or you're able to heal 3 if you're a city, because they're a little bit safer and nicer and you feel better sleeping there. So you are going to heal a little bit, but overall that's what your turn is going to look like. So your turns are really going to be different depending on the different events that you interact with. So now I'm going to show you what other ones might look like, because that's where combat is going to happen. Now, taking a look at the adventure book for the Echoing Hills, you can see how different the events are going to be. So some of them may be something quick. In a secluded valley deep in the hills, you find a bountiful patch of vegetation, gain the gathering +1. So gathering again is going to be something in here where you're able to get some resources, where you might be able to gather some herbs. So that's just giving you a gathering action, where some might have you make certain choices, and some of them are going to have you enter combat. So you can see that there are a few combat ones here. So I'm just going to flip this over to show you side by side what combat might look like. So if we were having this interaction here, Slumbering Titan. You locate a large, ancient temple nestled in a valley between steep hills. Its portal shows scenes of battles between enormous entities and elemental powers, and warns of their release. If no player holds the title Servant of the Titan, you may 1. Enter the temple. If you do not want to or cannot enter, you may 2. Study the portal's coverings, requires being an erudite, or 3. Look for useful herbs in the temple's old garden. And if you choose to enter the temple, that's the outcome that would have you enter combat. Inside the temple, you are confronted with a towering, stone-skimmed being. Its body is overgrown by jagged crystalline formations, and its eyes emit a green glow. So you'll set their health here, and then you would enter combat. Now, one thing to note is those 3 options that I read there in italics, that would be read to the player making the decisions, and they would have to choose before knowing exactly what would happen, and they wouldn't know that this would necessarily enter them into combat. Now, there are 3 different dice colors that are used throughout the game, and this is something that is noted that they're going to be improving for the final game, because they are a little bit tricky to see the difference. So just know that the final game, the dice won't be exactly colored like this, but you have red, which represents your strength, green, which is going to be your more dexterous attacks, and the blue-purple, which is going to be magic. So here on our axe, you can see that it's 2 red and a green. So we would start off with 2 red and a green to roll, and they would start off with 2 red because of what they have here. But before we roll, something that's pretty cool for us is we do have our axe, which is during the first attack roll, roll an additional 2 red. So we're going to be able to add 2 extra red to our first attack roll. So these would be rolled simultaneously. I'm just rolling them separately for the sake of me rolling them. But for the Titan, we rolled a 1 and a 5, whereas for us, we rolled an 8, a 6, a 10, and a 3. And once you roll, you're going to first have the player use their dice and then the monster, but you won't check for death until both of them assign their dice. So the monster will still do damage back even if you do reduce them to 0 health, but you're going to assign your dice into different slots. Oh, sorry, we also have an 8 over here. Now, As you can see in each of these boxes, they have dice that are displayed above them, and that means that multiple dice can be placed for that particular thing. Whereas looking at this bow over here, you need a 10 to be placed here, and you can only place one per round because there aren't those dice behind it. So that shows you can't infinitely use that spot. You can only use it once, but lucky for us, we're able to use all of our spots, but you are limited to the color that you need to use. So for a 6+, we're able to do 1 damage, but for any 10s, we're able to do 2 damage. So that's really great that we have a 10 here. So we're able to use this and do 2 damage to him, and then that would be spent. We would be able to use our 6 here to do 1 damage, and then we would be able to use our 8 here to do another damage. So they're already at 0. Our 3 here, unfortunately, isn't useful for us, but you can see that's why some of these are going to be very useful. For example, this one would have allowed us to re-roll a die. And here for the green dexterous attack, we actually wanted a 1 through 3. So rolling an 8 was bad for us, meaning that that one would miss. So that's not great, but we already reduced him to 0 health. But these dice still would be assigned. And on a 4 through 6, this 5 would be placed here, doing 1 damage back to us. So we would take a damage, and if they had a 7+, it would be 2 damage instead. But their 1 over here, fortunately for us, isn't going to do anything. Now, if both of them are still alive and no one is defeated at the end of both of those phases where the player will activate their dice, the monster will activate theirs, if both of them are still alive, you'll continue that cycle again. But if one of them has been defeated, if you are defeated, you will need to enter hospice immediately in the nearest city, but otherwise you're able to defeat them and collect the reward. So here the reward is, with the battle won, you find the entrance to a hidden chamber. Along the chamber's walls are inscriptions detailing 3 elemental powers, earth, air, and fire, and their connection to the ancient titan called the Earth Shaper, located in the Burnt Basin. As you study the inscriptions, you'll uncover clues leading to the location of the guardians. First up is the Air Guardian in the windswept Saltwind Shores. Gain 1 bone and 1 experience point, so you would gain a bone resource here and an experience point over here for that. And then gain the title Servant of the Titan and Adventure SS45. So what that means is that on your player sheet over here, under your titles, you would then write Servant of the Titan, which may trigger certain things when it asks if you have that title. And you would also write Adventure SS45 here within this code. So that means that when you're in that area, which is going to be the Saltwind Shores, you're able to choose during your event phase to trigger the exact adventure that you have logged, as opposed to rolling the dice for a random one. Now, another layer that you're able to add to your character is going to be abilities that you're able to gain. So there are different ability decks, and depending on what you get, you're going to have this extra thing added to your character. So when you do so, you're going to draw 3 cards, and you're going to be able to draw them from any deck you want. So if you know you want a certain thing, such as a heavy ability, which is going to be for the red die, more strength-based, then you might draw 3 of those cards. But if you're not sure and you're looking for a little bit of direction or perhaps a little bit of luck, you might choose from multiple decks. So these are those decks here, and as I said, you'll draw 3 but then only keep 1. So you could draw 1 from every deck, a mix, or you could draw 3 from 1. So for example, we could draw these 3 here, and we have Bubble, Roid Rage, and Last Breath. So we would take a look at these and then choose which one we want, but as you can see, you can slot dice to be able to use them. So for example, this one here, Roid Rage, could be pretty good for us, where you would slot a 3 or a 4 on a red die. It would do 4 damage, but you also take a damage back, so it would hurt you, but you are able to do a ton of damage. And then it has this flip symbol here, and that means that once you use it, you would flip it over for the rest of that combat. So you will get it back for every combat when you're entering into new things, but you're only able to use it once. So that's an example of the abilities that you're going to be able to add throughout the game, and that's going to be a way that you're able to customize your characters based on the die pool that you're generating, which is going to be based on the weapons that you have, especially if you've upgraded them to be rolling quite a few more dice in your different attacks. Finally, there's also going to be world events that are going to affect all players. So these are going to get put into play, and then they're going to stay in play until something removes them, but otherwise they're going to stay in play for that entire chapter. So for example, we have void energy here. During rounds in which the symbol on this die with the 1 pip was rolled during the impending doom, if a player ends their travel phase in the miasmic swamp, they suffer 1 damage and gain 1 experience. So that's a way for you to be able to gain experience, but you would have to suffer that 1 damage, which some may say is worth it. Now, the general pace of play of the game is that players are going to be taking their turns, going to these different areas and exploring and having these different events. You're going to be trying to gain resources to trade them in at the different cities for the things that you're able to do, and once you get cool things, you're also going to want to upgrade them to make them even better because you already have something that you're working with. So that's how you're going to be moving throughout the game, but you're also going to have those bosses to fight at the end of every chapter. So again, you're going to play 3 chapters and fight 3 different bosses, all escalating in difficulty, and even if you lose, you do play through to the next chapter, and there are ways for you to save that if you play just 1 chapter, you can save all of your things for the next chapter, but players are going to be able to fight together during this boss phase. So normally during the event phase, you are fighting alone, you're going through your own different decisions that you're making, but when the boss phase triggers, you're going to take turns fighting them individually. So you're still going to each roll your dice for the monster as well as the particular player taking their turn. You're going to assign them, take damage from the monster, and then it will pass on to the next player where you'll roll dice for both of them again. So you will be working together in that aspect, and this game is mostly cooperative, but there is a competitive mode. So if you decide that you want to be competitive about it, you are able to have a competitive winner in the game, but overall this is going to be a cooperative game where it's more about trying to be able to beat these different bosses and upgrade your character as much as possible, all while working within that short time clock, because you do have to move around pretty quickly to get things that you want to be able to be strong enough to even move into certain areas, but also to fight off these different bosses. So with that, I'm going to show you what the boss looks like. So here we have the mysterious woman who was our first boss, and there's a bit of text to set her up, and then after that, when she is triggered, all players participate in this battle. Flip this card to begin the combat, starting with the Prophet of Doom. So this will be flipped over, and depending on the number of players, you will set her health. So again, if we're playing in a true solo, we would set her health to here. And the bosses are going to have different activations for their different turns. Now, this is known as their attack profile, so they will shuffle through between these different profiles depending on what round of combat it is. So if we were just starting off, they always have this inherent ability, which is this player cannot use results as long as they are the same value as any monster result. So you can see where that's really tricky, that if you roll 8s as well as the monster, those dice aren't going to be able to count for you unless you're able to mitigate them somehow, which is why building out your character as much as possible is going to be very important to give you those options. But during the first round of combat with this boss, you're going to have the first attack profile, so they're going to be rolling a 3 red die. After each attack roll, if the player has 2 or more results of the same die value, discard them, do the same for the monster. So that can be really tricky, and with that one they're rolling 3 red die, and they want a 7+ to deal 2 damage. Whereas the second round of combat in a true solo game, as well as with other players, if you were playing with other players, everyone would have the first attack profile until it cycles through again, and then you would go to the next attack profile, and this one instead is rolling 4 green die. After each attack roll, lower all player and monster results by 1, and this one wants a 1 to 5 to deal 1 damage. And then you would roll 4 blue die. After each attack roll, re-roll all monster results that cannot be used once. So they're really trying to use all of their die for that final third profile, and on a 4 to 6, they'll deal 2 damage. So you can see at the bottom different things that would happen as well. For your victory, you would immediately read event GC 110, and for defeat, you would immediately read event GC 149. So even though you may be defeated, you would still move on to the next chapter, but you can see where the bosses are really going to be tricky because they're going to cycle through these different things, and if you were to enter the 4th round of combat, they would go back to this first attack profile and go sequentially in order again. Overall, Restless is an adventure game with a lot of replayability, so in my opinion, there's a ton for you to explore, especially with these random events, and depending on what characters you're building out, you might even make different decisions, so you may even sometimes encounter the same event, but then make a different decision along the way, which again, I think is very rare because you do have 100 events within all of the different areas, so there's a ton of replayability where you're able to find all of these different things throughout the game. Now, there's a ton of narration written into this as well. So going through the narrative, I felt was very interesting, where there were intriguing things going on and a very heavy fantasy element for you to interact with, but nothing was too flavorful that it took me out of it or felt like it wasn't my voice. So there were some things that definitely creeped me out. Nighttime can be very scary and it leaves you thinking about it, but it definitely never felt like it was too much or, you know, too silly or something like that. So one of the best things that I found about this game was the accessibility of it, because there's a ton that you're able to customize with your character, and then you're able to feel very strong when you're going into these different situations, and you're able to mitigate and change different things depending on what you have, but everything is so very clear and accessible that the rulebook itself actually boasts that you're supposed to be able to burn the rulebook at the end and only have to read it once, and then everything else for you is referenced either in your Traders and Treasures book, which does have a ton of references in it, or any specific rules that you may need as you're encountering them, they're going to be in the reference material. So I did find that to be pretty true, that there is a decent amount of iconography in this game, but it's all very straightforward and pretty easy to be intuitive to know what it means. So with that, I did think that it was pretty easy to set up play, which made it very engaging to be able to continue playing and play over and over again. So if you'd like to see everything that they have planned, you can check out the game file link down below for Restless. Thank you all for watching the Board Game Code channel. I've been Professor Meg, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!